Are we all on the Zoom?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the 16th of June, 2022 City of Nashua Planning Board. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mayor Donches, Mike Peterson,
Here.
Scott Leclaire,
Here.
Maggie Harper here, John Cathy, Dan Hudson,
Here.
Bob Bollinger,
Here.
Larry Hirsch,
Here.
Mark Meehan,
Here.
Ben Clemens.
Okay, so we have enough folks for a quorum. We're going to keep moving with the agenda. Next up on our agenda, I will do communications.
Mayor and members of the planning board, the following items came after your packet was mailed to you. A22-0088 and 0089 case. L and 439 South Main Street, Riviera University. We have a traffic report from Stephen Pernow. We also have a 614 Wayne Husband, city traffic engineer, email comments. And on 615, we have a Derek and Edson response to engineering comments. And number 5, we have a Prunier and Perlman letter of concern. A22-0105, that's 130 and 138 Spitbrook Road, Grace Lutheran Church. 615, we have Joe Mendola, engineering, no further comment. A22-0087, 607 Amherst Street, that's the car wash. 14, GPI submitted their waiver letters. 615, Joe Mendola, engineering letter, and Wayne Husband, traffic engineering email. We had a few comments on that one. A22-0103, 195 Daniel Webster Highway, that's Proctor Sports. 614, Hayner Swanson, waiver letters. 615, Joe Mendola. 615, for A case, A22-0107, 6 Northwest Boulevard, that's the New Hampshire liquor store. Joe Mendola, engineering letter, and that's it.
Okay, thanks. Next up for the board, we have minutes from the June 2nd, 2022 meeting. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at those minutes and want to make a motion as to whether they're ready for us to accept?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motion to approve the minutes from June 2nd.
All right, so we have a motion to approve as written by Mr. Meehan for the June 2nd minutes. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hirsch. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? That motion passes.
Mr. Chair, just for the record, I'd like to abstain.
Okay, so one abstention, Mr. Bollinger. Ms. Harper? Thanks. Next up, report of chairman committees and liaison. Anything? Okay.
There was a historical district meeting this past Monday. We had 4 cases, 3 of which were approved, and 1 was approved conditionally, which was a screen for the HVAC equipment at the Historical Society building.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. The procedure for the meeting. So as we move forward here, after each legal notice of each conditional special use permit, site plan, or subdivision is read by myself, the board will first determine if the application is complete and ready for us to take jurisdiction. If we do take jurisdiction, we'll start a public hearing where the applicant or their representative will be given time to present an overview of their project. They'll speak to whether or not they agree with the recommended staff stipulation, and the board will have an opportunity to ask relevant follow-up questions of the applicant or staff. Next, I'll ask for testimony from the audience. First, I'll ask for anybody wishing to speak in opposition or concern to the plan. And if you want to, you can come forward and speak. Come to the microphone, state your name and address. This is your time to express concerns or ask questions you may have regarding the plan. Next, I'll ask for testimony from anybody wishing to speak in favor of the plan. The board will then ask any relevant follow-up questions of the applicant, and then the applicant will be given a rebuttal period at which time they can speak to any of the concerns raised by the public testimony. After this is completed, the public hearing will end. The board will resume a public meeting, deliberate, and vote on the application in front of us. I'd ask that everyone keep their remarks to the subject at hand and not repeat what has already been said. The board wants to be fair to everyone and make the best possible decision based on testimony presented and considering all of our applicable approval criteria, which are established in the Nashua revised ordinances for conditional special use permits, site plans, and subdivision plans. Everybody for their interest and their attention. And if you do have a cell phone, could you please turn it off at this time?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to excuse myself from the meeting.
Okay, that's all right. Mike or somebody, do you want to take over? Larry's got it? Okay, no problem. Okay, so looking down into, I'm going to start with an older plan that's been resubmitted due to a lapse. So first up on the agenda is going to be new business site plan A22-0090. This is the Southland Corporation. It's an owner, 7-Eleven is the applicant. It's an application and acceptance of a proposed amendment to NR 1057 to remove existing concrete pad and gas canopy, install new dispensers, islands, and canopy and pad. This property is located at 367 Amherst Street. So, for the board, anybody had a chance to take a look at this resubmitted application? Want to make a motion as to whether it's ready for jurisdiction? Mr. Meehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have. I move that project's new business -0090 site plan is complete and ready for the board to take jurisdiction.
Okay, so we have that motion to take jurisdiction, A22-0090. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Bollinger. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. That motion passes. Do we have somebody for the applicant that will?
Online.
They're online? Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Jim McFarland. I'm with, working with the applicant, with 7-Eleven as well as Core States, the architect. Application for site plan modification that's just, it's been before the board before and was approved with several conditions. There were 32 specifically that were conditions for approval. All but one have been finalized. We've been waiting to get final approval from the legal department with the city for regarding a sidewalk easement with the Department of Engineering, and that's been one of the delays in us being able to meet the for the special provisions that you allowed for this approval back in August of 2020. So we were unable to get that in under the deadline and requesting I guess approval again for the same conditions. There's been no change on the site. All of the other modifications have been met with the exception of finalization with the sidewalk easement agreement with 7-Eleven is favorable to all of that. We just need to get a signature on that from planning so this can be put into the building department for building permit approvals and reviews. And there's been no change at all to the site in the since this has been approved and the project is ready to move forward. We just have to get through planning.
Okay. Thanks. The only question I have, maybe this is just for staff. So the stipulations on this, typically we just see something that says all previous stipulations be maintained, you know. That would be it. For some reason, my report is missing that second.
Right, on this one, we listed the stipulations again because it's not a one-year extension.
Yep.
It's actually a reapproval.
It had lapsed, right?
It had lapsed,
Yeah.
so that's why we listed them because it
Right.
it had expired.
But formally, could we just say all previous stipulations as written in
Well,
the
there
staff
is
report?
one.
Is there new ones?
Let me just make sure.
I just don't have that particular page. Do you guys have that in your packet? I'm just missing it myself. Okay. that's fine. No, that's okay. I just want to make sure you had it, that's all. Okay. All right, I'm all set with that. Any other questions by the board for the applicant? Go ahead, Mr. Meehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's for staff. Was the sidewalk issue resolved, or is that still outstanding?
So that, I believe we have a draft, we don't have a final version of it. They will have to submit that prior to, if there's any work, pre-construction meeting. We're gonna look for that final draft or prior to CO.
Okay, so we'll leave that in there, yep. Okay. Other questions by the board? Mr. Ballinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I just understand there's conditions listed. I think the applicant stated in his testimony that there was 30+ previously. I guess I just want to make sure that the current 15 encapsulate all conditions of the city at this point.
Correct, and actually stipulation, just looking at it, number 10, talks about prior to the final inspection, the sidewalk easement shall be submitted to. We did see a rough draft, but we want to make sure we get the final one before.
Okay, very well, thank you.
Okay. Other questions by the board for the applicant or staff? Okay. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or concern to this plan? Or on Zoom, you can unmute if you're on Zoom. Anybody wishing to speak in favor? Okay. Hearing none, board, hearing? No? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing. So pretty straightforward, just a reapplication. We've got, new stipulations. It's not uncommon for us to have to do this when, certain conditions can't be met under the limits of the approval. Anybody have any comments they want to make, or while we're in the meeting? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion? Mr. Ballinger?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve new business project A22-0090, finding that it does meet the requirements outlined in site plan NRO, section 190-146D. Stipulation. Stipulation number 1 with respect to a waiver of section 190-279N with respect to a lighting plan shall read is granted and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number 2 for a waiver of section 190-279P with respect to a landscape plan shall read is granted and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent. Stipulation number 3 with respect to a waiver of section 190-279I, B, W, CC, and KK with respect to waiver for SOAR, 100-year floodplain boundary, wetland boundary, stormwater report, and stormwater management plan shall read is granted and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number request of section 190-279J with respect to location of water, sewer, and electric lines shall read is granted and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number 5, with respect to a waiver of section 190-279O and OO with respect to showing existing utility poles and traffic analysis shall read is granted and will not be contrary to the regulation. Stipulation number 6, regarding the waiver of sections 190-279AA, BB, EE, and LL with respect to hours of operation, grading plan, existing conditions, and a certificate from the fire department shall read is granted and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent. Stipulations 7 through 13 as written in the staff report.
Okay, so we have that motion by Mr. Ballinger to approve with the stipulations as stated. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hirsch. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? That motion passes. Okay. All right, thanks. Next up, so we have some old business 2-0064. So on the agenda, this is the Collinbrook Investment Property lot line relocation. Property is located at 5 and 7 Westbrook Drive. This particular item was tabled from May 19th, 22. From my recollection, staff can correct me, there was two primary items that we were tabled for. One was a drainage report, some investigation into easement for a path. Mr. Hudson, has their drainage report been received and then had time to be reviewed?
So a drainage report was received via email at 4:01 on June 13th, and unfortunately, we have not had time to review it, given the lateness of the submittal and which we needed to review for tonight. So it is not an extensive drainage report, but given the public testimony about drainage concerns in the area, I believe it warrants a review, which we just haven't had an opportunity to do in depth.
Okay, and then how about the easements? Is there any feedback on that?
No, I haven't heard anything.
Okay, all right. I guess based on those two items, I'm going to recommend we move this to the next meeting, which is what date?
July 14th?
July 14th. Anybody from the board have any discussion on that, or want to talk about it at all? No? Okay, can someone make a motion? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would to table old business subdivision plan case 822-0064 to the regularly scheduled July 14th, 2022 City Planning Board meeting.
Okay, so we have that motion to table to the 14th of July, as indicated by Mr. Bollinger, to get city review of the drainage report at that point and more feedback on any potential easement investigation. Do we have a second on that? Second by Mr. Meehan. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Okay. A couple other items on the agenda that are moving to the 14th, just for the public's record in case they happen to be sitting around. A21-045 Temple Street, as well as A21-0300, A21-0301, and A21-0302. Those are all moving to July 14th, so they won't be heard tonight. There's no motion required on those. That's when they were tabled to in the first place. So next up on the agenda, business conditional special use permit. This is A22-0089. This is Riviera University, an application and acceptance of proposed conditional use permit for Riviera Village student housing. This property is located at L and 439 South Main Street, 1 Clement Street, 11, 15, and 17 all Oldfield Road, and 1 Weld Street. And it looks like we have a A22-0088 that's also associated with the same applicant, same location. So I would propose that we hear these together as one presentation. But first up for the board, regarding A22-0089, the conditional special use permit. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at that? I want to make whether it's ready for us to take jurisdiction? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to take jurisdiction of new business conditional special use permits, case A22-0089.
All right, so we have that motion to take jurisdiction of the conditional special use permit, A22-0089 by Mr. Bollinger. Do we have a second? Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. That motion passes. Now regarding the site plan, A22-0088. Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to accept jurisdiction over new business site plan, case A22-0088.
Take jurisdiction of the Associated Site Plan, A22-0088 by Mr. Ballinger. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hirsch. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Okay, so we have them both in jurisdiction. Do we have someone from the applicant that wants to present? And you can kind of start with the right through into the site plan.
Sister Paula Marie Bewley, President, Riviera University. Mr. Chair, good evening. Members of the Planning Committee, good evening. This evening, we wish to present Riviera Village, a two-structured residential project, important to the university as we look to expand student housing. Through this presentation, highlight the care that the university has taken in the site design and the landscaping in recognition of our neighbors. Offering the presentation this evening will be Mr. Tim Manis, who's the project architect for Durkin Edson. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sister Paula. My name is Tim Manis. Durkin Edson, 33 South Broad Street, Lidditz, Pennsylvania is where we hail from. So this evening, Mr. Chair, you have all the information, I know the letters and everything else, and we have a combined plan here. Would you allow me to first of all kind of take you through the project and then address the conditional use, at least review what we're proposing, or what would you rather do?
Yep, that's fine. Yep.
Okay. So Linda, if you could put just squint and see if I can actually see what I wrote on those slides. Should be a little icon at the bottom right. That's like a, there you go. That puts it in presentation mode.
Yeah, you might just have to flip through the slides on Zoom. It doesn't work for us.
Okay, that's fine. Just
go to the
go
next
to the next
slide.
slide and
We can see it.
run through this. So this presentation was as part of your packets, and we'd just like to review it with you this evening. Project introduction, design background, the phase one plan, which is what we're here to talk about, and the building specifics. So the next slide, please. When we began the project, Riviera charged us with, as far as the housing building goals, it was to be apartment-style, upperclassmen housing with built-in kitchens. Rather than building kind of a large traditional dorm building, Riviera wished rather to build something kind of a little bit more with a design eye in mind there. Primarily, there are single-bedroom units with some double-bedroom units on the topmost floor. Elevator, obviously, accessibility, move in, move out, that kind of thing. And the building entries were to provide easy access to campus and from parking. These buildings are 37 beds per building, and the buildings are of a smaller scale than, as I said, traditional dorms. We wanted to kind of make them fit more into the general size between the campus buildings and the residential buildings, so they kind of are a middle ground building. For the site goals, provide increased green space and organized walkways, continue with campus improvements. One thing we've been doing continuously for the last 9 years on campus is pushing accessible, barrier-free walkways where there used to be just walking through parking lots. Now we're trying to put walkways in, including along, in this case, Clement Street and Old Field, and then back around the project site on West. Provide additional parking for housing units and displace existing lot. It's important to note that this parking that is being proposed is residential parking. We're replacing 34 existing spaces that are signed and permitted for residential folks at Riviera University, people who live on campus. So we're just really moving those spaces. And then the additional 7 residents of the 2 buildings, which have 74 beds. So that's the parking that's there on the plan. The next note just says, think of the whole campus layout in terms of getting the buildings in a walkable position to the campus, that kind of idea. And then, as Sister mentioned, the quality and approach to continue from the Riviera work that we've been doing several years. Everything I'm going to refer to tonight in terms of walkways or lighting or everything else, you can go see in the projects that have been completed there, the most notable recent one being the Science Building project. Next slide, please. Briefly on the site plan, it's kind of an L-shaped plan, if you will. On the left of this plan is Clement Street. The first two buildings, or the two buildings that are proposed on this plan, are buildings with a parking lot kind of fronting or paralleling Oldfield Road with exits or driveways, entrances and exits on both Clement Street and Weld Street. The residential properties on the upside of those, the north side of those, would remain. So you see the project limits on there. And the next slide, please. So a series of images now to in a more graphic format. This is an aerial shot, more or less taken over top of the Madeline Hall area on campus, looking back to the two buildings, to the parking lot, to the green space, to the buffer area along Oldfield Road. Next slide, please. And then a series of kind of ground level shots. This one is if you're standing with your back to Regina Library with Memorial building on the left, the corner of South Main and Clement. This would be the image that you would see from there. We don't like to put power poles in our renderings, but for clarity's sake and realism, we've added the power poles because they are there. Next slide, please. And then from standing with your back to the Memorial parking lot, Clement on the left, Oldfield on the right. Condition is the next slide, or the transition. Yes, right there. Of note in this slide is we've reflected the screening barrier along that street that was discussed in the zoning hearing, so that from the Oldfield Road, that parking lot is behind that screening barrier. And then, of course, the new sidewalk and curb along Old access both to and around this site. Next slide. Going down Oldfield, kind of in that bend in the road there, looking back toward a couple of existing buildings. This is the existing condition, and next slide will show the proposed condition. Mostly it's showing the screening buffer in the foreground with the buildings in the distance. The far distance, you can see the Science and Innovation Center. Next slide, please. And this is from the corner of Weld and Oldfield, showing existing houses that are there now that are owned by the university. And then the condition that's proposed is shown in the next slide. With again, the screening buffer in the foreground, the landscape, and so forth. And then the next slide, please. A couple of shots. South Main Science and Innovation Center on the right, as if you're walking back toward Regina Library. You see the development on the left, the scale of the buildings. We variously talked about them as 2.5 or 3-story buildings. The zoning variance is for a 3-story building. The reason we kind of refer to them as 2.5 is because there are 2 full stories, and then the upper story is residences in the eaves of the building, if you will. Next slide, please. And then kind of more of an interior, this is along Clement Street, walking to the south. This would be the student perspective. If I'm walking from class in Sylvia Trottier down the street, this would be the sidewalk, and then my access into the middle courtyard, if you will. Next slide. This one is from, I believe, this is the interior courtyard between the buildings. Be separated in grade by about 3.5 feet, and there will be a little courtyard in between with a couple of tables added for small gatherings, people to sit and talk. Next slide, please. And then finally, I think this is the last image of this type. From the parking lot, you'll see the scale and materials of the buildings. As far as materiality goes, the buildings are proposed to be really the same as Science and Innovation, with some of the more residential type material like hardy plank on the upper eaves, or the gable end rather, and so it's kind of all residential look and feel, if you will. And then I'll quickly just go through, one more. I think we have one more along the Oldfield from a pedestrian perspective along, this one here, along Oldfield itself. A nice there with arborvitae, some ITEA maybe, and some other plantings as you go along the street. More briefly, in terms of the floor plans, I know this is information you asked for. It might not be something we want to spend a lot of time on, but just for your information, the floor plans show the layouts of the buildings. There's a resident advisor or a resident supervisor in each of these buildings. 4 apartments, single bedrooms, the first 2 floors. And then if you want to flip to that last floor plan, 2 slides down, that's the top floor, which has the smaller footprint to it. 2 stairwells, of course, required for exiting the elevator. And then the last few slides here really illustrate the exterior, just in terms of the sections, the straight-on look, elevation look, cutaway view. So that's the overall project that we're talking about. You have all the comments from the various agencies. And Mr. Chairman, I believe you said conditional use first. Would you like to go over every point, or a big?
No, just generally explain why you need the conditional use.
Excuse me. Well, the biggest issue with Riviera always is that we always need a conditional use plan. Riviera is located in either the RA or R9 zone, depending on where you are on campus. I think this is RA. And so no matter what we do, we always have to ask for conditional use, back even from the Gateways project till today. Riviera's been there a long time. Obviously, the residential neighborhood has been around it a long time. We don't believe we are proposing, well, on the positive way of saying that, we believe we are proposing improvements, just as we for many years now, to the look of the area, organizing the campus, organizing walkways, parking, putting lighting in that casts the light down, not out. And for those various reasons and the reasons outlined in the letter, we believe that the conditional use is fitting for the project.
Okay.
I could elaborate further if you have questions. Yeah.
Sure. Can you explain the topography and buffering between the parking lot and the residences on South Main?
Really, it's going to be very flat there. If I'm, oh, wait a second. You said?
From the parking lot to the residences on South Main.
So,
Is that kind of up?
could you go back to the plan all
Is
the way
that
back?
uphill a little bit? Like the parking lot's lower?
Yeah. Need to go back to the plan there, too.
Yeah.
We're actually not next to South Main with this project. So,
Right.
on this slide over on the right,
Yeah.
you see South Main Street actually kind of goes off the slide
Yep.
that way, down to the 4 o'clock position. So the parking lot, our project touches Weld Street down toward the intersection.
Right.
So it's probably a couple, 3 or 4 or 5 feet lower than actually the elevation of South Main. Corner over there, won't really see an obvious change in terms of what's next door.
No, but from like the
So-
backyards of those residences on South Main, are those backyards higher than the parking lot a little bit?
Probably a little bit,
It
yes.
looks
I
like
would
on
think
the-
so, a little
It
bit.
looks
I'd
like
have
on the plan, there's
Yeah.
some contour lines.
Yeah, I could,
Yeah. Sure. The numbers are a little fuzzy on mine, so.
I think the topography is a little more distinct. The drop is a little more distinct from along Clement Street. It's a little flatter down at Weld, but still,
Okay.
it does go downhill a bit there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the parking lot's down at about 86, top of curb, bottom of curb 85. Up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, actually 5 feet, 5.5 up to the intersection of Weld and South Main.
Got it.
So take a couple of feet off that, you're in the backyards.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And is there any proposed buffering, sort of, so I'm picturing so looking at this map, right, I drive into the parking lot and park on, I'm gonna call it Plan North here, but, you know, my headlights are facing forward towards that backyard. Is there any
Yes.
buffering on that
You know,
lot line?
so in between the parking lot and that lot line, the corner lot, let's
Yep.
just put it that way.
Sure.
There are some existing trees there that aren't going to go away.
Right.
But, you know, if we believe it's necessary, we certainly are glad to add some additional buffering there.
Yeah, so right now,
for
the
that.
thing along,
Oh.
I'm gonna call it that lot line.
Yeah, you know, it's, Let me just go to the landscape plan here and refer to it. That would be the smart thing to do. It's mainly open green space through there, but there's nothing preventing some additional landscape buffer from being added to that.
Right.
So,
Okay, so you'd be amenable to that?
Yes.
You know, we've just had instances, I think, in the board in the past where, you know, it's the constant light kind of shooting, you know, headlights, but, you know, relatively low buffering can block
Right.
headlights, you know, so, doesn't have to be super high, you know. Okay. Other questions by the board for the applicant? Mr. Ballinger? Yep.
Mr. Chair, yes, I guess maybe to your point, and perhaps the applicant can confirm, but one of the properties fronting South Main Street are actually owned by Riviera College. I don't know what their status is now, if they're used for rentals or if there's other plans in the future, but it looks like maybe that buffer might not be as important on the South Main properties, but I guess my question, I'll flip it, about buffers on the Oldfield side.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
I didn't know if there was any lighting vehicles that would be facing southerly, because it looks like those are privately not owned by the university.
Yes,
properties.
to be clear, you're correct. The lot at the corner of South Main and Weld on the west side is not owned by Riviera. And the lot in the middle of the bend, if I could say it that way, on Oldfield, kind of, that is not owned by Riviera. The rest of the lots surrounding there, at least on that plan, are. So to address the Oldfield question, that buffer will be about threefold, really. There's a fence there that's proposed, a solid barrier, and you can see this along the driveway behind the Muldoon Center. There's a solid vinyl fence there.
Yep.
With land. Same idea here, except it's just thinner. We're using arborvitae, we're using the fencing, so that that will be a solid barrier all the way down through there.
Okay.
So to answer that question.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Other questions by the board? The only other question I have is, just whenever I get an application that says Phase 1, I want to know what 2 is, and whether it's like, you know, is it in this area, is it somewhere else, or?
Maybe. Of course, zoning, if you're familiar with the zoning decision, we had asked for the first 4 buildings,
Okay.
which would go to the right of the top building there, if I could say it that way, just along South Main Street.
Yeah.
When they guess.
Sure, okay.
And, you know, we would need parking for those, and obviously we'd have to come back through a whole process, but
Yeah.
this project is 2 buildings with the parking that we need for those buildings.
Yeah. But conceptually, the Phase 2 that's desirable, I'll put it that way, there are more buildings along South Main, or are they still in the 2 by 2 by 2, or are they, you know?
Front along South
They're
Main
front.
conceptually,
Yeah. so
with the
it'd become
central
an L.
green space, correct.
Got it, okay. All right. And that roughly the same size, so parking-wise, those would generally require another 30, 40 spaces each?
Right.
Yeah.
Our approach is this. We understand that the borough code, the land development ordinances allow some range in terms of be added. And Riviera is selecting to build one parking per bed. We like to keep the campus parking on the campus, not spreading out somewhere. Since this is residential parking for people who live here, it's a little easier to control. And they will be permitted individuals' vehicles for those spaces.
Yeah.
But then residential parking, if you're going to say that.
Right.
So that's our approach to the parking.
Okay. Any other board questions? Mr. Hudson?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So you would indicate that the permitted parking, is that permitted parking only going to be issued for residents of those residence halls, like that nobody else, no other commuters, anything will be allowed to
Well, two things. It is not a commuter lot. It is a residential lot. The lot that is there now that we're taking away and relocating, that is called Lot B, and that is where residents of Guild and Trinity, which are on-campus dormitories, park. And this would be the same thing. If South or if Riviera Village doesn't fill it up, then that can be assigned to other resident parking. So there's there. It's people who live there or parking there.
Good. Okay. Other questions by the board? No? Okay. All right, thanks. I'll go ahead and open this up to the public. First, I'm going to open up to anybody wishing to speak in opposition or concern to the plan. Go ahead and come on up to the microphone. Make sure you state your name and address for the record. State your concern or ask your questions, whatever you may have.
So my name's Steve Stewart, 7 Old Field Road. More questions than anything else. I was lucky enough to grow up on Indiana Drive and then Eastbrook, so I know Riviera College very well. My sister, my mother went there. My father was a professor there. So the college has a lot of great attributes for the city, and I think we need. Concern is neighbors. We're talking about 74 new parking spots for these 2 dorms, plus the 34 that they're replacing, as they stated earlier, on the lot or the parking spot that's getting taken away. The question that I have is, the plans that they presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals included 4 more buildings, not 2. During the middle of the presentation. So the game plan, if the presentation was up, if you don't mind, is basically 3 more on South Main Street and then 1 behind it. So I think the question that's going to come into play is, how many spots are they really going to need if they build all of those? That'll be addressed at a later date, I'm sure, but something to be thinking about as we're looking at this plan right now. One of the comments that was made the Zoning Board of Appeals was it's a cute little hamlet, and I would agree with that. That's one of the reasons that we bought the house that we did. It's a beautiful little neighborhood right next to the Nashua Country Club. There's a lot of nice little single-family homes there. I like the design that Riviera has come up with for these dorms. They're not, 10 stories tall. They're, 3 stories tall. They've got a nice concern, once again, is getting back to, that number of students kind of coming in and out. They obviously need parking. The reason they need parking, school is expensive now. So my concern is going to be traveling in and out of those parking spots. I'm going to assume that these kids, the only reason they need a car is that they go to work, right? So if they're going to have part-time jobs, they're not going to be 9 to 5. They're going to be, maybe till 10 o'clock at night coming back. One of our concerns as neighbors is that entrance along Weld Street and exiting through Weld Street, because if you look at the neighbors, you're going to have that ambient lighting kind of coming through as you pull out of that parking lot and come down into that Weld Street intersection. I think what you're going to be doing is those lights are going to be flashing the houses there, and then as they turn, there's another house. So, and then as they come down to, for ingress in there, I think our concern is, can we move the entrance and exit only to the Clements side so that you're not going to have that ambient lighting from the cars distracting the houses? Because if somebody's coming in at 10 o'clock, I'm embarrassed. I'm 57. I like to go to bed a little early. Lights, kind of flashing in the windows. The other question I had is, what stops, the commuters from parking there? I'm assuming they're not going to police that 24 hours a day, so the question is going to be, will they do something to make sure that the commuters aren't parking there and kind of, once again, having movement in and out of the parking lot? But there is one house, and actually there's 2 houses that abut that parking lot. And, once again, making sure that there is protection for their houses in regards to that lighting. I think that's important. So those are really just my comments about the project, so.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if there's any questions from me here.
Nope, I think those are clear. We'll see if we can get those addressed. On up.
Good evening, members of the Planning Board. My name is Cassandra Stellos Malvers. I'm the trustee of the James K. Stellos Revocable Trust, which owns 1 and 2 Oldfield Road. I'm also a member of Stellos Family Investment Properties, LLC, which owns 455 South Main Street and 5 Oldfield Road. I grew up at 2 Oldfield Road. My 84-year-old mother has been our family home for more than 60 years. I currently live in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, but my husband and I are in the process of building our new home at 455 South Main Street, and our backyard will be the 5 Oldfield Road lot. I come to this meeting to raise my concern about the planned construction on Oldfield Road. The proposal being made by Riviera University completely eliminates more than half of our neighborhood. This is which has always enjoyed minimal traffic, as it is a dead-end street and is completely residential. The university's plan will destroy multiple single-family homes and will replace them with multi-resident student dormitories and a very large parking lot. While I have several concerns regarding the project overall, in the interest of time, I would like to focus on my greatest concern, which is the proposed parking lot. The parking lot has 108 parking spaces. I ask you to reject this plan, as it is in excess of the maximum number of parking spaces allowed for dormitories per the city's parking matrix. The maximum allowed would be 74. This plan calls for 34 spaces beyond the maximum. I am aware that the university believes that it should be allowed to go beyond the maximum because it is losing a 34-space parking lot with the construction of these dorms. But these parking spaces exist today than the proposed Riviera Village. They are for residents of current dorms that will still exist after these new dorms are completed. These extra spaces are not for the proposed dorms, so they should not be included in this project. The application is for, quote, associated site improvements. This parking lot should provide parking only for the 2 dorms on the plan. Anything more would not be associated, so it should not be concerned that this large parking lot, which would stretch the entire block from Clement Street to Weld Street, will have a negative impact on the character of our neighborhood. As you will note, it has the exit on Weld Street, which everyone's been discussing. Weld Street is a very small street. It has only 3 homes with driveways on the street. The emptying of more than 100 cars onto this little street daily will impact the very character of our quaint, quiet neighborhood. This type of traffic, and it should not be required to do so. Additionally, the light pollution that would be introduced into our neighborhood by the parking lot lights and headlights at all hours of the night is a detriment and will harm the property values along with the overall culture of this entirely residential neighborhood. I would respectfully request that the members of this board personally visit Weld Street, if they have not, and view its size. I'll ask you to imagine the impact this would make. Imagine how more than 100 cars entering and leaving this lot would block the road and impact the use of our driveways and the peaceful use of our property. I ask that you imagine how this would impact the value of our homes. When you consider all of this, I'm hoping you will come to the same conclusion that I have. This proposal does not meet the criteria under the conditional use permit standards, and the university should be asked to revise its plan to respect both and its neighbors on Weld Street and Oldfield Road. Any approval should be for a smaller parking lot that is associated with these Phase 1 dorms, and it should be located at the campus end of Oldfield Road with access on Clement Street. Our counsel, Attorney Perlman, has provided an alternative plan that moves the access for the proposed parking lot to the Clement Street end. This is Riviera's campus. The Weld Street side is a residential. Please require the university to revise their proposal. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition, concern, or have a question? Come on up.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and the members of the Planning Board. My name is Shantanu Sen. I'm a resident of 9 Oldfield Road, which is right of Weld and Oldfield at the top, at the bottom right of your screen, if you can picture that. So I just bought into this house just earlier this year. Actually, we are 3 of us are new residents of that neighborhood, beautiful homes. I'm going to echo my concern specific to the parking lot and specifically to that entrance and exit off of a Weld Street, because once those exit out of that parking lot, those headlights are going to be pointing directly at my home. And of course, in addition to that, the concerns about the load and the traffic up and down that Wells Street, which is as people are entering and exiting Wells Street from South Main, the space going into that parking lot is extremely small. So, you know, I don't know how the study, if anyone trying to calculate the speed of vehicles coming in and out, before you know it, you've hit one end of the street or the other, and that's of specific concern to me. I've got a young child, and I can picture him biking around that neighborhood, and all that is going to be probably impacted. So I'd appreciate if that was revisited as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Come on up.
Barry Coughlin, 451 South Main Street, Chairman, board members. I kind of want to echo what the previous people have said. I agree, actually, with their architect that it should enter and exit the parking area on the campus. I think to dump it out in that residential area where I have a grand, we have other neighbors, and in the future, that neighborhood is going to turn over again, and there are going to be families there. I think we have to think of the long-range safety effect of that neighborhood and its future residents and children living there. There's plenty of room down the other end to put the entrance and exit. I just think the board should consider like that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, good evening. My name's Elizabeth Hood, and my husband and I are the owners of 12 Oldfield, which is right at the bend opposite the project. So as much as we're struggling with the fact that there will be dorms there instead of the field that we look at right now, college has done for us around the 5-foot fencing, the arborvitaes, the shrubbery, I feel like they've made the best of a bad situation, if you will. What concerns me is that the folks at the end of Weld Street don't benefit from any kind of fencing or screening because people that would be exiting onto Weld Street need visibility for any other cars that are coming down Oldfield, and so they don't get the same benefit that we do. And so Peter and I had talked about it. An exit could be made anywhere before the bend on the campus side of Oldfield Road. We would be completely comfortable with that if it could be like a right turn only as people would be coming out of that parking lot as a way to try to make this a win-win-win for everyone involved. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello?
Sure, I can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for allowing me to speak. My name is Dennis Malvers. My wife, Cassie, whom you've just met tonight, and I are preparing to break ground on our new home at 455 South Main Street, where the lot for 5 Oldfield will be part of our backyard. In addition to all expressed, I would like to point out that during a meeting that neighbors and I had with representatives from Riviera, I was told that there are no plans for fencing or screening on the side of the proposed parking lot that would run along Wells Street. Unlike what they're pledging to do to fence off and landscape the parking lot along Oldfield Road, there are no similar plans with the parking lot. Riviera representatives told me that they would not be providing any type of screening on Wells Street because it would interfere with visibility for drivers who exit their proposed parking lot onto Weld. Of course, this won't be an issue if all access to and from the parking lot was restricted to the college campus closer to Clement Street. Should cars be allowed to enter or exit the parking lot on Street, I am questioning how far the restrictions for visibility carry beyond a parking lot entrance and exit. How much clearance must there be? I am asking that Riviera provide fencing and landscaping for the Weld Street side of the lot that will not be regulated for visibility. With this proposed parking lot, it will be bad enough that the resident taxpayers in the area will have traffic, lighting, and noise as a result of Riviera's expansion. but it's extremely frustrating to know that we will be looking at cars and various activities taking place in the parking lot whenever we, the neighbors, are in our yards or looking out our windows. I'm asking that the planning board please require that the college install along Wells Street fencing and landscaping beyond the minimum clearance, and that the fencing and landscaping be similar to what they're pledging to provide along Oldfield. In closing, I recognize that Riviera owns the property and that it plans to develop. But I also believe that there is a real purpose to these types of hearings that include taking into consideration the impact that one's development will have on those who live next door, all of those who will be affected every single day. My understanding is that this hearing is to examine Riviera's expansion as it relates to the impact that it will have on the surrounding community. So I ask that the board members ask themselves what the vision should be for the neighborhood community that surrounds the college, and not what the vision should be for the college campus. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on Zoom? Okay, not hearing any. I will go ahead and ask, is anybody wishing to speak in favor of the plan? Okay. Don't hear any, so at this point, I will move back to the applicant. So I'll give you the opportunity to respond to the public questions, concerns. Reminder that, most seem to be associated with parking lot size and requirements and Weld Street for the most part.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Yep.
Tim Manis again from
Yep.
Durkin Edson.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, my glasses aren't the best. So regarding the number of parking spaces, just to reiterate, we're really doing the same thing exactly that we did when we did the Science and Innovation Center. We replaced the number of parking lots or parking spaces that we were removing so that we would have a net gain. We believe it's really just not realistic to say that we cannot replace the 34 that are there. Piece of pavement, we're just moving it around the corner. Those people have to have a place to park. So our approach to the parking is, let's replace what we know we have to replace and then build what we need to build. So to repeat, unless I'm wrong about this, and I would ask your staff to correct me, the range of parking is allowed and our number is correct in terms of what we're allowed to build for the maximum number of space. So 74, 34, 108 altogether. That's how the number came about. Obviously, it's a public street. Weld Street is. We're proposing to connect it, the parking lot in both ends, for actually ease of access, so that there's not a long dead-end parking lot. You may also in your pack letter, the city traffic engineer asked for evidence that a traffic impact report was not necessary. The traffic engineer who came up with that memorandum has sent it in and it's determined that we don't even meet the threshold for a traffic impact report due to the fact that it is a residential parking lot and will be enforced. I would have to ask this on the enforcement mechanisms there. Riviera has a security team with permitting and those kinds of things. Let me see. I'm just trying to catch up with the questions here. The gentleman who was on last, I apologize for not getting your name. I do remember you. So just sitting here looking at the plan a little bit, there's no reason we can't take that screening and just wrap it right around the corner and kind of pinch the entry down in that parking, so that parking will just disappear. And I'll say that for a couple of reasons. One, the right-of-way for Weld Street is actually pretty far beyond the edge of pavement. So as I look at a scale car here on my drawing, on the screening, And we still have about 17 feet till you actually get to the edge of the, or 10 feet, 10, 12 feet, till you get to the edge of the pavement. What I'm saying is, you can pull out beyond the screening and see where you're going. So I believe we can take that around there without any issue, and are certainly willing to do that, so that the only gap will be the driveway gap as you go around that corner. Parking
Maybe
lot.
just comment on the functionality of the parking lot if that was not an exit. I'm not sure that's capable in terms of the fire department. They might need an emergency exit regardless.
Yeah,
but let's say it was
so
needed.
far, we
Yeah.
haven't gotten any negative comments from the fire department, other than that they want to readdress those two buildings to be
Right.
Oldfield Road buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah, having a dead-end parking lot is more difficult in terms of functioning through the parking lot. Even a dead-end leg, just take it through, allow that access to go around. And again, keep in mind that this is residential parking for people who live here, not a commuter lot with lots of coming and going every day. And honestly, to remember also that this is a seasonal institution. When there's nobody living in the dorms, like the parking today is pretty well. So that, I think that's at least a factor to consider in terms of a college campus parking facility.
Yeah.
So that's hopefully
Did you
addressed everything.
Did you explore that being an, either an inlet only or an exit only? Obviously, that cuts the traffic.
It doesn't seem like that would really address any of the comments, because the comments kind of range from traffic lights. I mean, thankfully, the houses on, let's see, let me get it right. There used to be an old house there with a lot. That was removed, then the 6 houses. So, yeah, I think there's 3 lots in the front that face South Main, 3 houses in the back that face Oldfield, yes.
Right.
None of them actually face Weld Street. So that's the sides of the houses there. Did I answer
Yeah.
your question?
No, I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously, when we do this, we've seen this on many plans where things have been changed to one way. I mean, they reduce the count, right? I mean, it does, because you don't have the coming and going in that exit. You only have either the coming.
And not to
So
speak for
it's
the
a-
future or
I'm
to
just
say
wondering
anything,
about the
but.
functionality.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
and-
clearly, one-ways are just generally kind of not the best idea in a lot of situations. But clearly, there's a remedy there for the future, perhaps, if it becomes an issue. But we don't believe it will be, because of the nature of the parking lot itself and what it serves the residential buildings.
Right. And I generally don't about phase twos that don't exist at that point or something like that. But, I'm just trying to clarify things for the future. Is there any potential for the phase two to have, ingress or something from South Main?
Actually, we really can't build any more parking that block.
On that
We have to find somewhere else to park.
It'd have to be something.
Well, I guess we could. I mean, it depends on what you do in the future. But
Right, yeah.
it's, but my point is, for the next 2 buildings,
Yeah.
we would have to find a place to park those residents.
Somewhere on campus.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's just a bigger campus planning strategy that
Yeah.
has to be considered. But there's nothing written down right now about that.
By the board, Mr. Peterson?
I have a question for the applicant. So in this setting, can vehicles exit onto Clement Street, or they have to exit at Wells?
They can exit both ways. It's 2-way exit entry, 24-foot wide throat on the parking lot. So it's fully functional.
So if vehicles are able to exit on Clement, that's less
Yes.
into the intersection of Wells and
Correct.
and Old, whatever it's called,
Weld Street, Oldfield,
Oldfield.
Clement Street.
Yep. So if they exit on Clement, less headlights going into those homes down there in the corner.
Correct. They're pointing the other direction.
Okay. Other questions by the board? Okay. Does anybody have any other questions from staff while we're in the hearing? Or the applicant, because once I close the hearing, obviously, we can't talk with the applicant, so. Okay. I'm hearing none by the board, so thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing. Okay, so for the board, an application, it seems like we've got some housing expansion, we've got some parking. Seems like most of the concerns that have been discussed by by those that live around the area have to do with the parking. And I didn't hear really anything super functional about not wanting dorms or the design of the buildings or anything like that, or the look. So interested in what people's comments might be, what their thoughts are. The applicant is working. Yours for a second. It's back on. Let's see if we can keep it going here. All right. I did hear from the applicant that they sort of be willing to wrap around the same buffering onto weld. Obviously, you can't wrap it all an inlet that's 24 feet. So I don't know, Dan, 24 feet, that's kind of the minimum for a two-way inlet, do you think? Or is that a reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, it could be probably a little less, but fire would need to weigh in on that too.
Yeah. I mean, we could certainly, it would be within the board's jurisdiction to have the applicant and staff to minimize any entrances or something like that. If somebody desired that, I think we've gone as little as 20, maybe 22 in that. I mean, I think I've seen some 20s, but for in and out. But other comments by board members, Mr. Meehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be voting on this matter today, but I do want to point out that regarding enforcement of food parks, it is a very robust system at Riviera to enforce parking. Mm-hmm. Every car has a sticker. That sticker is specific to a function of the person who owns the vehicle, if it's a resident student, a commuter student, a faculty member. And students will tell you that the security administration are very eager to enforce all parking rules on campus, and that there would be I would say 24/7 enforcement of parking on campus in that lot for residential only, and depending how specific to those residents.
Okay. Other comments by board members? Thoughts on buffering? I mean, what do people think? Buffering on Oldfield. Any thoughts on buffering on I had brought up about buffering against the other side of the lot. I didn't hear anybody really have any concerns with that side, but
Mr.
Bollinger?
Just
Yep.
generally speaking, I'm trying to recall, I realize those homes were recently built, but it would appear that there was maybe some vegetation there previously that could have remained. It's not up to this applicant to try to replant what was clear cut for the construction of some of the newer lots, kind of on the northeast or eastern side of the Weld Oldfield Road residence. But it seems as though the applicant is willing to at least have discussions with the neighborhood. I would certainly encourage them, if there were additional, that they certainly keep those lines of communication open. But I think beyond the standard screening, I'm not sure what else could be accommodated with respect to the buffering, at least on the Wells Street side.
Okay. Others? Staff maybe comment on the parking. There was some of the public about what is allowed in the next one.
Right, so when we looked at this, the 34 existing spaces right now are for the other two dorms, and then they're adding the 70-something for the
Four, I
mix.
think, yeah.
So that's why we didn't look at it as they're exceeding the parking, because those other 34 spaces are for the other two dorms.
Okay.
I would also like to just add that if the board chooses to, in your packet, we did get comments from Mr. Mendola,
Right.
dated June 14th, and also we got an email from Wayne Husband, the traffic engineer, dated June 14th as well. So that should also be added. That one should be added, that's not in there right now.
Okay. Good. All right. Any other comments? Mr. Mean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just encouraged at how many, while there were concerns, the very strong affirmation of Riv's work with the community, addressing issues, the meetings that are being held. I'm thinking about an applicant at our last meeting who had refused to meet with the butters and even acknowledged them. And I think that Riviera has done it above and beyond. Also in the time fit neighborhood, the way they are as well, I think is also commendable.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? What do people think about, I mean, I think if we're gonna add, if we want any additional buffering, like if somebody wants it on weld or whatever, I think you should probably spell that out on the plan, so, I do think that's something to think about. Anybody wanna make a motion?
Mr. Chair, just
Yep, go ahead.
clarification on that point.
Mhm.
Would that pertain to the additional wrapping, which I think the applicant's testimony alluded to? I'm not quite sure how that.
Yeah, I mean, I
phrased.
heard the applicant say it, but I think that's up to us anyway. If we want more buffering, we can ask for it. But, you know, it'd be, I guess, my recommendation if they were gonna continue buffering along Weld, that it be consistent with the design of the buffering on Oldfield. There was a couple layers, essentially, fencing, landscaping. And from the applicant, it appeared there was enough depth between Weld, the start of all of those spaces to put that kind of buffering in. So, Mr. Meehan? Yep.
Was that also in conjunction with the fire department to ensure access?
Well, I think the buffering would have to be consistent with sight lines and stuff like that anyway, in terms of, I mean, that would be reviewed at a permit level.
Mr. Chair,
Hudson?
we would review that. I guess,
Yep.
can.
Go ahead, Mr.
I should have asked during the meeting probably, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's anything that can be done, like a gate at that weld entrance that closes at a certain time or something like that, so that we wouldn't have, there wouldn't be the traffic at the night, but there would be during the day, but it would still provide the emergency access, you know, that I'm sure. I agree that we should add whatever buffering can be added on Weld, but that driveway does come right out to Weld, you know, pointed right at the new house, and I do understand the point about the vegetation was removed, and, you know, perhaps they could erect a fence or something to help shield themselves from it, but.
Yep.
But, a completely compelling case of why a long dead-end parking lot is a problem necessarily. So I wonder if there's gonna be some hybrid arrangement where, you know, for most of the time it's open, but then during the nighttime hours, that's not the primary point of access. Or a major point of access.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in comments from the board. I mean, I certainly can open the, looking about that if the board feels like that's something that several are interested in. Is there any other interest in talking to the applicant about that? Mr. Hirsch?
Is it practical to have a gate that would open and close at different times? People get used to a certain traffic pattern, it seems. Do you want, I don't understand how that might work.
Yeah, I would think it would be, because the residents that live here, so they become very familiar with it. It's not intended to be for people that aren't familiar with the area.
Yeah, I mean, they have parking people that could, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily even have to be automated, frankly.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
You know?
might work there.
I mean, I'm not
It's just
sure I
something
care either, but, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Peterson?
Thinking about that, opening and closing the gate at Weld Street at different times. You know, if we're doing it by when it's daylight or dark in the winter, that would be 4:30 PM. In June, it's 8 PM. So that would really vary quite a bit. So I think the question is, would the residents be familiar with that? It all depends on the position of the sun, whether that gate is going to be open, but it is a limited community. They may understand. As soon as it gets dark, use the Clement Street exit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, just from my own experience, I mean, I spent a lot of years of my life on military bases, and the gates, they worked off of time. I mean, people weren't concerned about the lights per se at 4:30 when they generally aren't sleeping when it's 4:30 in the afternoon, so it was more of a, it tended to be a kind of, you know, 6 o'clock and after kind of, or 7 o'clock and after. I think there's some wiggle room there to set fixed times that don't generally cause issues with, you know, a lot of base housing has gates just like that. That's super common in those kinds of areas, so. Do people want to talk to the applicant about this? I mean, I'm happy to open it. Does someone just make a motion?
We probably should ask if it's practical. We probably should.
Yeah, so, I mean, it'd be a motion, so someone want to make that motion? If you want, Mr. Bollinger?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to make a motion to reopen the public hearing for this applicant, speak to possible limitations on access via the driveway on Weld Street.
Okay, so a motion to reopen the hearing to talk to the applicant specifically about limited time access essentially to Weld Street. Do we have a second by the board?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Hudson. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, the motion. For the applicant, this is specific. This is not a public testimony. This is just the applicant question for the board. So you heard what we're talking about, so I could comment on it, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Morgan Hollis. I'm an attorney at Gottesman and Hollis, 39 East Pearl Street in Nashua. And we have listened to the conversation, obviously, and talked internally. And lead up with a little bit of background in that I represented Riviera before the zoning board, and also with matters with the Hoods briefly in terms of their living across the street from this, and that's how some of this landscaping plan developed. Clearly, the university was going to landscape, but it's been significantly boosted with fencing to address the issue of exactly where the Hoods live. The university has no landscaping around on either side of the Weld Street, on the Weld Street driveway, so it's consistent. That's not a problem. We think we can do that even if we had to lose a space or so. So that can be part of we agree to that stipulation. In terms of the access, this was actually suggested originally on by the Hoods when the first plan was shown and discussed. Examine the possibility of putting an access on Oldfield rather than on Weld. And it's not only impractical because it simply lets the traffic come out on Oldfield, which then proceeds to Weld and makes a left turn. And so you're introducing traffic at the intersection of Oldfield and Weld because that's your second means of getting out onto South Main. Whether it's closer to Clement or on Clement, or on Oldfield. That's the reason people go out on Weld. So if you put it in the middle of Oldfield or even on the Weld Street side of Oldfield, people will exit and then they'll go up to Oldfield and they'll take a left. It was suggested that it would only be right turn out coming out of the parking lot. That's going to be an enforcement issue. People are going to come out of Clement Street and turn left and go down Oldfield because it's out. That's just the nature of the beast, and that enforcement is difficult. Furthermore, it's Oldfield and Clement, and it's public ways. We can't restrict people who drive down Clement who want to come down Oldfield. So once they're out of the parking lot, if they find a way to go into the parking lot on the other side of Clement, turn around, they're going to go down Oldfield and back up to Weld. I don't think you're solving a problem, as suggested by both Attorney Perlman, by putting everything on the Clement Street side. You're just moving it over temporarily and then coming back. As to the gate, a gate is not a practical solution. I've been involved in gated entrances and exits, whether it's timing, whether it's evening. You're going to have people who come in from the Clement Street side, park, and then go out maybe in the evening. They go down to used to seeing it, and they don't realize there's a gate there. They stop. The headlights are still shining. Now they have to back up because there's no turnaround at that area. There's parking spaces, but no turnaround because it is a driveway exit. So you're also going to have people who will come in from Weld Street, and they're going to find there's a gate. Now they're going to be down on Oldfield, introducing traffic at the intersection again, which is what we're. If you think practically about it, and those who have driven down Weld, you know immediately opposite this driveway that we're talking about and spending a lot of time on is this new house, which is built with the garage facing this driveway. The home faces Oldfield, as it should. Again, looking at it, where the cars come out is not facing into the front windows of a home. It is facing in. So, well, we think it's an interesting concept. The idea of a gate is absolutely a no-go for the college. We just think it's the wrong answer. It's going to introduce safety issues. There are going to be people who will go down there, hit it, or turn around. Headlights are going to shine out regardless. And again, as I say, it's going to introduce traffic into the Oldfield Weld intersection, which is purposely what we're trying to. So that's our answer to the question of whether we'd consider a gate. Thank you.
Questions for the applicant from the board for this information?
I think I heard that they didn't oppose the additional shielding or wrapping that.
Right.
I think they said that.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Other questions for the applicant by the board while this second hearing is open? All right, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and close that hearing. Back to the meeting. Okay. All right, so we've got the response from the applicant, you know, that they don't feel that's practical, but, I mean, I think there's something to the, I think, you know, you obviously would have to reconfigure the end of the parking lot to be able to turn around. That's a no-brainer, and to some extent, the gate could limit through it. It doesn't have to be a transparent gate, if you will, or could be opaque, but I do understand the challenges associated with it, and it does introduce complexity at the end of the parking lot, certainly. So, other comments by Mr. Peterson? Yeah.
I thought the person microphone stated that the front of the house in question would not be facing the headlights. The headlights would be hitting the side of the house in the garage, so it's not really a direct hit, you know, on the front windows of that home. So I think that's a little bit of a relief for that home owner.
Okay. Other comments? Okay. All right. Somebody want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Ballinger.
For clarification, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
we would need two separate motions, one for the conditional use permit.
Correct.
And one for the site plan amendment for phase one. Is that correct?
That is correct, and you would have to do the conditional use permit first, because the site plan wouldn't be functional without it, yeah. Okay.
That being said, I would
Yep.
like to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to approve new business project A22-0089, conditional use permit, finding that the application does meet the requirements outlined in site plan NRO section 190-133F, subject.
All right, so first we have that motion by Mr. Ballinger for approval of new business A22-0089, the conditional use permit with no stipulations. Do we have a second on it? Second by Mr. Hirsch. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Abstentions? One, okay. New business site plan?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve new business, project A22-0088 site plan, finding, pardon me, that it does meet the requirements outlined of site plan NRO, section 190-146D, subject to conditions of approval. Condition number 1, with respect to a waiver of section NRO, section 190-279B, F, and S, with respect to scale, dimensions, square footage of all buildings and structures, and building and structures and driveways on abutting parcels, shall read, is granted, and will not be contrary to the stipulations 2 through 4, as written in the staff report. Stipulation 5 in the staff report shall be amended to read letter dated June 14th, 2022 from Joe Mandola. Stipulations 6 through 13 as written in the staff report. Stipulation 14, that the applicant shall make a contribution of $3,600 to the Main Street Traffic Corridor account, and also add a stipulation 15, that the applicant shall provide buffering to the extent possible on Wells Street driveway, consistent with other buffering along the site frontage on Oldfield Road.
To approve A22-0088, the site plan with the 15 stipulations as indicated or stated by Mr. Bollinger. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Peterson. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention. That motion passes. Okay. Okay, moving on. Next up on the agenda is going to be new business subdivision plan. Let me make sure I've got it right here. Yep. This is case A22-0105, 138 Spickbrook Realty LLC and Grace Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod owners. This is an application and acceptance of relocation. This property is located at 130 and 138 Spitbrook Road. So for the board, has anybody had a chance to take a look at this application and want to make a motion as to whether it's ready for us to take jurisdiction? Mr. Meehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I
Yep.
move that new business A22-0105 lot line subdivision is complete, ready.
Okay, so we have that motion to take jurisdiction of A22-0105 subdivision plan. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bollinger.
Any further discussion by the board?
No? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? That motion passes. Okay, we're ready for a presentation.
Chairman, members of the board, for the record, my name is Jim Petropoulos. I'm a professional civil engineer at Hayner Swanson, doing business at 3 Congress Street, tonight representing the owners 138 Spitbrook Road, which is World Academy. And it's just read into the record, we have a simple plan of land for a lot line relocation between 2 parcels in South Nashua. The 2 lots, 138 Spitbrook Road. 138 Spitbrook Road is the home of World Academy. It's a private K-8 school located on Spitbrook Road. It is just under a 6-acre parcel. In the abutting property to the east is 130 Spitbrook Road, Grace Lutheran Church, and they have about 6.5 acres. Both of these properties are split zone. They each contain portions of the PI in the area. And the 2 lots are really bordered by Spitbrook Road to the south, the Nashua Fire Department to the east, Oracles to the east, and the Huntington Project to the north. You can see on the drawing we've located the buildings and the parking and the driveways for each project. Both of them have been here since the early 80s. Both parcels share a common to Spitbrook Road. and a wetland exists in the northeast corner. What's really being proposed is to relocate the common lot line between the two parcels in the back of the site, thereby transferring 1.25 acres of land from Grace Lutheran to World Academy. And the reason being is that World Academy, since its inception, because it's been a growing entity, and the opportunity arose for them to purchase property. We have no definitive, our client has no definitive plans at this time for the land back there, but to have land to grow to was important to the school. Mr. Chairman, our application includes one waiver letter, section 19282. As with waivers, we try to I let the waiver letters speak for themselves. I'm happy to go into any detail if you want to question me on those. So in summary, we believe we have a complete application in accordance with your subdivision regulations. The recommended staff conditions of approval are fine. D. Scott, correct me, item number 2 is not applicable, is that correct?
Correct. Item number 2
So
can be crossed out.
I would urge, if we're successful, maybe to delete item number 2, because there are no comments from the traffic department.
Okay.
And with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thanks. Any questions by the board? Mr. Peterson? Yep.
Yes, this may be a question either for the staff or the applicant. I'm just trying to get clarification in the staff report in Part 3, project. It says you want to increase Lot 76 by 54,572 feet. And then I look at the chart below. It says the existing Lot 76 at 261,202 will then become 7,286. That seems like a huge reduction, not an increase of 54. And then the other thing, it says map B lot 2428 is 5.194 acres. So we're mixing up square feet and acres, which is hard to keep track of. So when you convert 5.194 acres, that is 226,300 square feet. So like the numbers, they don't make sense. And I don't know if that's typed up or we just have information that I can't comprehend.
No, that's probably an error on the staff report. Look into that.
Yeah, so I think those numbers need to be reviewed.
Right.
Let's let the record show the plan is correct.
Sure.
Also, I'd like to recommend, don't mix up acres with square feet. It's like two different in there while you're at it.
I think the intent of the report was to break out the different areas in each zone, which was quite thorough, but 1.25 acres from Grace Lutheran to World Academy.
Yeah. Just to summarize, the zoning on each of, it's the World Academy that's, which one's the R zone?
Well, actually, thin line, I think it almost runs through the Grace Lutheran building, if I can look at it.
Okay.
And it's PI to the east and R18, but there's a small piece of PI in the back corner of World Academy. So World Academy is primarily R18, and the Grace Lutheran is really split zone, kind of right through the building.
Okay. And will the new piece of it, World Academy, it'll take on the R18?
Yeah, again, as you can see, it's mostly R18 zone land. Of course, I think it's section 190.13 that says the majority zone we elect to use, but we're not really talking uses. It doesn't really apply to the movement of the lot line. But
Right. Yeah, no, I was just trying to understand for my own.
Yeah, you wonder how it ended up there.
Yeah. Other questions by the board? No? Okay.
Great. Thank you.
I think we're good there. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or concern, or on Zoom? Not hearing anything? Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in favor? Or anybody on Zoom? Okay, I'm not hearing any. I'll give the board one. Did you have anything else? Okay. Okay. If there are no more questions of the applicant by the board, I'll go ahead and close the hearing. Moving to the meeting seems pretty straightforward, reasonable approach. Anybody have any discussion comments, or? No? Okay. Mr. Meehan, you want to make a motion? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, move to approve 2-0105 lot line subdivision, finding that it does meet the requirements in subdivision NRO 190-138G with two stipulations. Stipulation 1, the request for a waiver of section 190-282B9, which requires physical features on site within 1,000 feet. Find the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Striking number 2 and number 3 as written by staff.
Okay, so we have that motion to approve A22-0105 with two stipulations, as indicated and stated by Mr. Meehan. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Peterson. Discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? That motion passes. Okay, thank you very much. Next up on the agenda, new business site plan A22-0087. This is GR Nashua Land LLC.
Put the mic closer to him.
Yep, can you just check that mic, see if it's working?
As well.
Yeah, okay. Again, this is A22-0087, GR Nashua Land LLC owner, an application and acceptance of proposed remodel of existing car wash, along with associated site improvements. This property is located at 607 Amherst Street. So for the board, anybody had a chance to take a look at this application? Want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes. go ahead.
I would like to recuse my business A22-0087.
Okay, so that's good. Go ahead. So for others of the board, anybody had a chance to take a look at this application and want to make a motion as to whether it's ready for us to take jurisdiction? Mr. Peterson?
I'd like to make a motion that new business A22-0087 site plan amendment ready to be taken by the board.
Okay, so we have a motion to take jurisdiction by Mr. Peterson. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Meehan. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. That motion passes. So do we have someone from the applicant that wants to present case A22-0087?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm here virtually. Yep.
That's fine. Go ahead. We can hear you.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Garrett Picarillo. I'm a civil engineer with GPI, and I'm here representing the applicant, GR Nashua Land LLC. Also joining us virtually is Jim Waterman from GR Nashua Land LLC. My screen at this point?
Go ahead, yep.
I think it looks like I'm disabled.
Oh, hang on one sec, we'll give you access.
Thank you.
Let you enter.
All right, looks like that went through.
Okay.
Can I just confirm that the board can see my screen?
Yep, we're good.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we appreciate the opportunity to present our site plan for the property located at 607 Amherst Street. The site's approximately 1.9 acres. It's located in the general business district, and the site currently contains a car wash use. We're proposing for the car wash use to remain, which will include renovation of the existing approximate 5,500 square foot car wash building, along with various site improvements. If you don't mind, I'm going to flip over to Google here, just because I think it's a little more effective at just kind of laying out the land and giving you a quick overview of the existing site. We're located here at 607 Amherst Street. Just for reference, we've got the Everett Turnpike here to the east. We've got the Amherst border up here to the west. Just going in on the site. This is our site right here. This is the existing car wash building that we were just looking at on the survey plan. And I just want to note along Amherst Street. Amherst Street is a limited access facility, so we actually only have a right-in entrance here on the eastern side of the site and a right-out only exit here at the western corner of the site. Just quickly, I'm going to go into a street view just to kind of show you what's there today, which will help just kind of visualize. So this is the current site here. It's, as I said, it's a car wash use. Currently, as you can see the driveways here, this is the right-in only entrance, this is the right-out only exit, and we have just the limited access to this raised median here in the center of Amherst Street. The current building actually has 4, I guess, car wash kind of facilities within it. We've got 2 automated touchless wash bays located here and here along the western side of the building. Then here we have a full automated car wash tunnel. And then here you can kind of see it behind these vacs here is a car wash detail bay. So just wanted to kind of give you that visual there. I'll flip back to our plan set here. So there you can see the building. These are where the touchless bays are. This is the tunnel here, and then here is the detail bay that is currently there today. I just want to note that currently when vehicles enter the site, they enter here and they travel along this one-way lane, single-way travel lane here along the edge of the building in order to access so they can come in and actually enter into that first detail bay here, and with the other facilities, they actually loop around on this shared access way at the rear of the site to access those bays. And actually, I apologize for flipping back and forth on you, but I actually just want to show for reference as well. There is currently a cross connection between the abutting sites. So we've got a Starbucks on the west and a Town Fair Tire on the east. And all of these 3 owners, or I should say they partially own a piece of this cross connection in the rear and maintain it accordingly. So I just wanted to note that for clarity's sake. So again, flipping back to the plans, just want to give you kind of an idea. You can see the existing building here right now. I'm going to flip over to the demolition plan, and you can see this hatched area here is what we're actually proposing to demolish. And that consists of these 2 touchless bays that I noted, as well as this tunnel here. This portion of the building is to remain, so it's not a raise and rebuild. We're just going to have this piece remain and then remodel it. We'll get into further here as I go through the plans. So I just want to note that this piece is remaining, and as I flip to the site plan, you'll see the proposed final building footprint here. So if you can kind of see it here, this is the footprint of the existing building here, or the portion of the existing building that is demolished. We've got and then what we're doing, or what we are proposing to do, is extend this tunnel to be 110 feet long total. So we're going to have kind of an addition on here. They're going to remodel the interior, car wash equipment, etc. And then this portion of the building here is going to remain with some slight interior remodeling. It houses, some office rooms, some mechanical equipment, that sort of thing. Besides the building itself, what we're proposing is, first off, for these driveways to really just remain in place. They work well for the site circulation. There's no reason for us right now to really propose to change these. So we're proposing to just kind of tie in with the curbing within the site, so not proposing any. Vehicles will enter the site, and my apologies for zooming in and out so much. They will come in and they can just enter this car wash queue here. So you will see, it's very similar to what was there or what is there today, at least to enter this car wash lane here. You will notice there was some parking in the back here existing that you needed to go in the back and kind of. We're proposing to remove that, which allows us to extend this curve for the queuing lane out a bit, just to get a little bit more stacking in separation from the entrance, so the cars have the ability to straighten out before they enter the tunnel. I'll also note that we are, as you can see here, we're proposing a separate bypass lane as well, as numerous benefits to the site from a circulation perspective mainly. But as I said, it was a one-way previously. We're proposing to widen this pavement a little bit up to the property line and add in that bypass lane here. So in addition to, the building improvements or renovations, as well as kind of the site improvements that we're also proposing to add a section of two-way parking here that is mostly consisting of vacuum spaces. So all these symbols here are the vacuum equipment. We're proposing 17 vacuum spaces, as well as 4 typical parking spaces, including one ADA space, which is required, of course. We're parking because that's typically who would be needing to park here, besides people who are using the vacuums. Also proposing trash enclosure in the back. Right now it's here today, so we're proposing to kind of move to the back. It's a little bit out of the, less visible, and works a little bit for the trash removal to come around here and just pick up and exit the site as well. Overview of the site plan here. I'll just kind of keep going just to kind of show you guys what else is included in our site plan set. This is our grading and drainage plan. It's pretty minimal in terms of changes to the grading. While we are proposing to reconstruct all of the pavement, from basically the edge of the cross connection back here and out at the driveways, we're pretty much maintaining on-site grades as much as possible, matching existing grades, especially along this right edge where we pretty much have to match grades exactly in order to not grade onto the neighbor's lot in any way, which we are not. In addition to that, the big focus here with the grading and drainage was to maintain the on-site drainage patterns and site drainage system in any way. So we were able to accomplish that. You can see the catch basins that are on site are still remaining, all the associated piping's remaining. We were able to kind of grade the site to make that work. The only drainage, improvements that we're proposing, I guess I wouldn't really call them improvements, more of a reaction to kind of how things laid out. And here that landed right in the ADA parking space, so we're going to replace that with a manhole, and worked out a little better for the grading. So we are adding one catch basin, but that doesn't change the overall drainage of the site, the patterns and what's flowing to the system. In fact, we did provide a drainage memo with our application, and in that we noted that we're actually decreasing the impervious area approximately 2%. So that was why we felt we didn't really need a full drainage study. And then in addition to that, I should also note, not to go back to the building, but we're actually decreasing the building, as you can probably see. We're decreasing it by about 1,600 square feet as well. Okay. I'll just keep flipping through. This is, just want to note the drainage, erosion and sedimentation control plan that we have for the site, typical construction entrance, protecting all of the on-site inlets, drainage inlets, as well as adjacent off-site ones, and with the silt fence that's required along the perimeter of the site, in addition to a stockpile area out back. We have submitted a landscape plan, city's landscape requirements, and notes that we're in compliance with those requirements. Just construction details. I guess I could show you guys, this is what the vacuums will look like for, generally for just visual purposes. I know I just showed you it on a plan. But these are just all our construction details, and we did some as well, so that was part of our site plan application. And then just quickly, I'll go over the building plans that we have. We did submit this floor plan. Just quickly, this is the hashed area is what was existing. This area over here is where we're extending the car wash tunnel to a total length of 110 feet. There is a second floor, I should say. And I'll just quickly go through the elevations. We've got the front of the building, so that's actually basically standing from, on Amherst Street facing the building. You can see the exit here. This would be the side of the building if you were to the right. So if you were driving, entering the site and going in the lane to access the car wash facilities. That side of the building. We've got the other side of the building here, and the entrance, which is facing the rear of the site. I'll just quickly just show these visuals that were also submitted with the application as well, just to give you a better idea or an actual visual. All right. I also wanted to note, we did submit a waiver request form. We're asking for 2 waivers, which I believe was noted earlier. The first one was for section 190-279-EE. That is the requirement, specifically the requirement to show all existing conditions for adjacent lots. If I actually go back. So we're not showing, we don't have full survey for each adjacent lot. So that's kind of the grounds for why I'm asking for the waiver. We do show, all the parcel information, owner, parcel ID, all that, and we go about 30 feet or so off the property line, and we do a full survey for that. So we do have, the topography, structures, pavement, that kind of fall within that buffer, which we feel, is sufficient to kind of analyze the existing conditions, as well as for us to adequately and accurately design a site. That's waiver number 1 that we're requesting. Waiver number 2 is for NRO section 190-209A. That one is actually specifically the requirement within that section, maximum 15-foot wide curb cut for one-way travel. And it's really in reference to this entrance here, this right-in only entrance here. That's not dimensioned here, but it's approximately 14 to 15 foot wide in this throat here. And the reason that we're asking for the waiver is because we've received a comment from the fire marshal, which is absolutely valid, that the fire code asks for a 20-foot wide clear horizontal entrance for emergencies. We don't have that here, so it sounds like they're asking for us to widen this, and kind of in anticipation for making that change, I've asked for this waiver so we don't have to circle back later on that. So that you didn't see that reflected on these plans. Received that comment.
Okay.
Finally, the only other thing I wanted to note is that we did receive the engineer comments as stated from Mr. Mendola as well as Mr. Husband. So I've had a chance to really review those. I've actually been in contact with Mr. Mendola since we received those. I've reviewed them. I feel like they're extremely straightforward and fair comments. I have no issue with any of them. I've already taken care of a lot of them, to be honest, and I should have the rest of them completed very quickly. So I have really nothing that I even need to discuss all that much further on those with anyone. Besides one question I have out to Mr. Mendola that he told me he'll answer shortly. as well. And Mr. Husband had very straightforward comments as well. So planning to address those.
Okay.
With that, I will send that back to the board for any questions or comments you have. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So I'll open it up to the board. Anybody on the board have any you want to give to the applicant? Mr. Meehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the great, very detailed overview. And my interest in this is really because of the master plan. And, you know, there's very specific language in the master plan about what they're hoping to see happen in this corridor. And I really appreciate being moved from the front right near the street to the back. I think that's a great improvement, and that's consistent with the master plan. And I was curious, the current building shows kind of a basic block work on the lower section. In your plan, it talks about stone veneer, but I didn't see that in your schematics. Could you clarify the siding material?
Yes. Jim, is that one that you might want to speak to?
Yeah, sure thing. This is Jim Waterman, one of the ownership of GR Nashua Holdings. So to address the question, we're going to do a sort of a field stone or natural stone veneer on the outside, which I believe goes up to about a 4 to 4.5. A limestone or granite ledge with kind of a natural look, and then above that, we're going to do kind of a cream-colored board and batten look to replace the EFIS siding and split-face block that exists today.
Terrific, thank you.
Okay. Other questions by the board? Mr. Hudson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Comments are quite minor, but there was Mendola's comment number 6, which asked the question if a lighting waiver would be required. I want to make sure if one is required, we don't miss the opportunity of granting it or considering it at least. So I asked the applicant to address that comment.
Yes, absolutely. So I have already been in contact with my lighting vendor, asking him to revise this plan. Essentially, he said he's going to need to dim the lighting for the lighting sconces along the wall at a minimum. But we apologize for that. I missed that there were a couple that were slightly in excess, but we are addressing that, and we do plan on meeting that requirement.
Okay, great, thanks. Mr. Peterson?
Yes, a question for the applicant. The memo received from the Nashua Fire Department dated Monday, May 23rd, and regarding this application, they had 3 bullet points that they felt need to be addressed. Have those 3 issues been addressed satisfactorily for the fire department?
So they have not. I have not finalized my coordination with the fire department on put together the apparatus plan. That is complete. The only, just to be frank, the real reason that I haven't finalized that with the fire department yet is because with that comment to widen the driveway to 20 feet, that then actually then makes it so we are proposing some work to be done in the right-of-way where we weren't previously. It was noted that there's a moratorium on the roadway on Amherst Street, or that section of Amherst Street, for the next 2 years approximately. So I was just trying to coordinate that with Mr. Mendola to see if that's something that's going to kind of hold up the construction of the project, is to be completely honest what it is. If I'm hoping, he said he's reviewing it, but we certainly want, we have no problem planning on just, taking the recommendations from the fire department and making those changes accordingly. But I was just waiting on a response from Mr. Mendola if we're able to do just a very minor amount of work that would be required in the right-of-way to widen that driveway entrance.
Okay.
Follow on?
Sure.
Can
Mr.
I just
Hudson might
address-
have a response to that.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I can speak to that moratorium question. I did discuss that with Mr. Mandola today. We do have a pilot program whereby cutting into the roadway only like 1 foot won't trigger the full moratorium restoration. So I believe they'll be able to suitably match the driveway and redo the sidewalk and not need moratorium.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Peterson? Yeah.
One of the other bullet points was the raising the pay station canopy so fire apparatus could fit under it. Has that issue been resolved?
Yes, so we have a solution that I'm planning on proposing to the fire department, which is, I'm just flipping back to the site plan here. Everyone can still see my.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So what we're actually looked at a couple options, but what we've decided to propose to them is simply to remove the canopies and then just not have them. It's kind of difficult. I looked at shifting things over a little bit. We don't really like the layout and think it's as good, internal circulation. It makes things a little congested and tight. Supposed to remove those awnings and then he'll have his 20-foot clear here, as well as the other change, just to kind of piggyback on that, is I'll need to widen this as well, but that's very simple. I'll just pull the curb back here and stripe this area. That way they'd have their 20-foot minimum clear with no vertical obstructions this entire lane.
Okay, thanks. Yep,
Follow
Mr.
on,
Peterson.
one more
Sure.
thing.
Yep.
The first bullet point from the fire department talked about the travel path and needs to be, for the apparatus, needs to be shown on the plan. Will that be done?
Yeah, absolutely. That is already done. So we have specifications from the fire department for the fire apparatus. We built, a truck that's, built accordingly to run in our software, and I've already run that, and it works. It works with what's shown here, but I didn't want to prematurely send it to him as we are still looking at possibly widening and getting rid of that canopy, et cetera, as we just talked about. So I just didn't want to make it look like I wasn't planning on. That plan is ready to go once we just have final determination on those items.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Meehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. There's a large sign perpendicular to Amherst Street for the car wash, and it's noted in your existing conditions plan, but it doesn't appear in your other plans. Is that going to remain, or is that removed?
My apologies, I'm not sure. Are you talking about the large ID sign here?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, yes, that is, and I apologize if we didn't note that. I thought I did on the site plan.
It might just be the
right-
copy.
Okay, yep, yeah, no worries. So this is, we're just calling out this existing pylon sign to remain and just simply be refaced.
Okay, thank you.
All right. By the board? Okay. Hearing none, I'll go ahead and open up to public. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak in opposition or concern to the plan? I'm not hearing any. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the plan? Not hearing any. Okay, I'll give the board one last opportunity to the applicant or staff while we're in the hearing. They're still up there? Yeah. Okay. All right, hearing none, I will go ahead and close the hearing. So for the board now, we're in the meeting. Seems like a pretty straightforward application. I think we went through the waivers, went through the comments from fire and those are being addressed or on their way to being addressed. Anybody have any other discussion points or? Mr. Meehan?
Mr. Chair, what's the date of the letter from, it's number 4, stipulation 4, from Joe Mandola, Street Construction Engineering, dated?
Be 6/15 for both.
15.
6:15, okay. All right.
Yeah, I was just looking at the master plan. It really seems to take a step forward and lay the master plan. It's great.
Yep, okay. All right, any other comments, or anybody want to make a motion? Mr. Meehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve new business A22-0087 site plan amendment, determining it does meet the requirements outlined in section 190-146D with 13 stipulations. Stipulation 1 will read, the request for a waiver of section 190-279EE, which requires showing existing conditions on site and adjacent lots, is granted, finding the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. The request for a waiver of NRO section 19209A, which requires maximum one-way driveway width, is granted, finding the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. 3 as written, 4 with the date of 6/15/2022, and 5 through 13 as written.
I think maybe it's the dates on number 9, maybe.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's still the 15th as well.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So amend that to number 9
Mhm.
would show date 6/15/2022.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we have that motion to approve with the 13 stipulations as stated by Mr. Meehan. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hirsch. By the board. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? That motion passes. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Moving on, next on the agenda, case number A22-0103, Proctor Square, LLC owner. This is an application and acceptance of proposed two-story, 2,150. This property is located at 195 Daniel Webster Highway. So with respect to the application and the board, has anybody a chance to take a look at it and want to make a motion as to whether it's ready for us to take jurisdiction? Mr. Meehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to accept new business A22-0103 site plan amendment to NR 895, finding it and ready for jurisdiction.
Okay, so we have that motion to take into jurisdiction A22-0103. Do we have a second on it?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bollinger. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None, that motion passes. Okay, you're up.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Petropoulos, I'm a civil engineer at Hayner Swanson, doing business at 3 Congress Street in Nashua, New Hampshire. Representing Proctor Ski, with me tonight is Jeff Proctor, the owner of Proctor Ski. Also sitting here with me is Gary Thomas. Gary is the president of North Point Construction, the construction managers for the project, and Gary's here in case I can't answer any technical architectural way. My job here tonight is to present the facts of this case and certainly answer any questions you might have. This site is at 195 Daniel Webster Highway in South Nashua. It is a 1.9 acre parcel located in the highway business zone. And this property is bordered by Daniel Webster Highway to the east. Restaurant, I think it's to the south. And then 2 multifamily residential projects to the west and to the north. Bluestone to the north and Louisburg Square, I believe, to the west. But again, everybody knows the Daniel Webster Highway, it's really a mix of multiple of uses from offices to retail, commercial spaces. Many years ago, this was the Dexter Shoe Facility. You might remember the motif, and it's funny to drive around New England and see them occasionally in different parts of New England. Proctor Ski has been there about 12 years, Jeff? Approximately 12 years?
Almost 10.
Almost 10 years, okay. Currently, the site contains a 1-story building, 4,500 square foot, 38 parking spaces. Access to the site comes in with a shared driveway. and it kind of rises and bends up a hill, and then you turn in into the main parking lot, and that's how it's been way back in the Dexter Shoe days. The site contains 47% open space, where 20% is required. And the reason being is the site is very well buffered to the residential properties to the north and to the west. Southbound on Daniel Webster, you hardly see the building up there because of the hill kind of blocks its view. But certainly traveling northbound, down about the signal, the Walgreens signal, you can look up, you can get a nice view shed of Jeff's business. It's being proposed to add a small, 2-story, 2,100 addition to the southwest side of the building. The addition is needed to accommodate Jeff's robust ski and snowboard rental program. We try to describe that. Currently in the existing building, when he's renting skis and snowboards, it takes quite a bit of time. And in doing so, customers tend to kind of converge on some of the sales aisles, and it causes kind of a little traffic problem inside the building. And so to have not only the ski and snowboard rental in its separate area and the storage up in the second floor of those products, those skis and snowboards, it will certainly improve pedestrian movements throughout his main store. You'll still enter the main door on the right, work program, and then there's a door on the east elevation, southeast, that you'll be able to exit, so you don't have to lug all your gear, go back through the store and through the counter. So it certainly makes a lot of sense to me. Minimal site work to build this addition. We're adding, I think, 1 parking space. We comply to the numbers. No real other improvement. Architecturally, Linda, if you'd be kind enough to just go to the architectural that Gary prepared. Again, it's a 2-story building addition, 26 feet to the peak of the roof, pitched roof. A combination of various materials and colors. I think when you look at this elevation, along with the existing facility, theme, I think, and that's what's trying to be created. We are proposing a waiver, Mr. Chairman, to use a metal roof and to use metal or vinyl siding on just the addition. Of course, it'd be tough to kind of match that log look, and I don't think anybody wants to, truthfully. But we think Jeff's done a really excellent job kind of creating that alpine ski theme for the building. 2 waivers. The second one, of course, is one you see commonly, 279 EE, surveying adjacent properties. Again, like the previous applicant, we've surveyed all the information needed for you to make a decision on this tonight. So we believe the application conforms. The conditions as outlined in staff report are acceptable to our client, and we respectfully seek your happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thanks. Any questions of the applicant by the board?
Yes.
Mr. Bollinger?
Just a quick one, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure the applicant was aware of the contribution that was requested
Yes.
by Mr. Husband, and
Yes.
you're amenable to that. Okay.
No.
Now we have to start over.
The Bollinger.
Very well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Other questions by the board? Okay. Not hearing any, I'll go ahead and open up to the public. Anybody in the public wishing to speak in opposition or concern? I don't think we have anybody here in the audience. Is anybody on Zoom? Doesn't look like we have many there either. Okay. Anybody want to speak in favor? Give the board one last opportunity to ask any questions. Mr. Hudson?
Mr. Chair, I would just ask the applicant to speak to staff condition number 9, which talks about an easement to be granted as requested, I believe, by Director Sullivan.
Correct. Absolutely.
Sure.
Number 9 reads that the applicant will grant a 10-foot easement for the site's road frontage as shown in note 22 of the plan, and to update the pedestrian easement to Louisburg Square. Okay, absolutely. Linda, would you be kind enough to bring back the plan? Thank you. So on a busy street like Daniel Webster Highway, there's always the notion that there could be improvements, expansion. It is a fairly wide right-of-way across our frontage, but I think that the request for the applicant to consider dedicating an easement for future widening and future construction makes sense, and our client was willing to do so. The second part of condition number 9, the shared access with Louisburg Square. Right now, the easement is a little out of date. It speaks to access, but it doesn't really define pedestrian access. And so staff wanted to ask our client if he would consider having that easement language amended to include pedestrian access in case at some point Louisburg wanted to build sidewalk down to DW Highway, and that was a Proctor as well.
Okay, Mr. Hudson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank you for explaining that. I think the consideration was there's no sidewalk along DW Highway in this section, along the frontage of this parcel, and it'd be very difficult to construct that as part of this project because it's this very steep slope. So I believe staff's intent was to seek an easement or, desire to construct that at a future date that would be possible. So we appreciate the willingness to accommodate that easement.
Okay, great. Any other questions by the board? Mr. Bollinger?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess maybe a question for Dan. Is there a mechanism? Does that have to get re-recorded, or is just the plan note sufficient?
No, an easement deed will need to be prepared.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
very
not a
good.
dedicated land plan. So since we've got to tweak the other easement, Mr. Proctor's attorney can put both deeds together. Staff will review it, council will review it, and then they can put it on record.
Okay, very well. Thank
Great.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Any other questions of the applicant by the board? Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and close the hearing. Go into the meeting. Seems pretty straightforward. Looks like a good building. Seems like the architecture makes sense to me too for, the location and the type of building. So no issues with the waivers on my end. But anybody have any other comments, questions that we want to talk about in the meeting? Okay. Somebody want to make a motion? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion. In this case, A22-0103, property located at 195 Daniel Webster Highway. Motion to approve, finding that it does meet the requirements outlined in Site Plan NRO 190-146D, subject to 11 conditions. Condition 1, with respect to a waiver of Section 190-2 regarding existing conditions and easements on adjacent adjacent properties shall read, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation 2, requesting a waiver of Section 190-172 requiring certain architectural features and materials be used shall read, is granted, and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. 3 through 5, as written in the staff report. Stipulation 6 in the staff report shall be amended to read, letter dated June 15th, 2022. Stipulations 7 through 11 as written in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bollinger. So we have that motion by Mr. Bollinger to approve 10 stipulations as stated. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Meehan. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? That motion passes. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, next up on the agenda, we have case A22-0107. This is Inc. owner, This is an application and acceptance of proposed one-story, 3,368 square foot building addition along with associated site improvements. This property is located at 6 Northwest Boulevard. So for the board, has anybody had a chance to take a look at this application and want to make a motion as to whether it's ready for us to take jurisdiction? Mr. Ballinger?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept jurisdiction over new business, case A22-0107, property located at 6 Northwest Boulevard.
All right, so we have that motion to take jurisdiction of A22-0107. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hirsch. Any further discussion by the board? All aye. Opposed? None. That motion passes. We have jurisdiction.
This is so rare. This is like,
I guess you're going to
I've been getting
present.
creamed.
The trifecta.
For 40 years, I've been getting creamed. I'm looking around.
Might be somebody on Zoom.
No, there's not even,
No, I
there's literally
checked that.
nobody on Zoom. It's just you.
Oh, my gosh. Well, thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Jim Petrosky, engineer, Hayner Swanson, Nashua, New Hampshire, 3 Congress Street, representing the Demoulas family entities. I think it's Valley Properties on this particular site. And it's just read into the record, we're seeking a site plan approval for a small building addition to a retail store in Northwest Nashua, as well as a change of use, I guess. The location is 6 Northwest, located just off of Amherst Street. It is a .85 acre lot, Zone GB, general business. And this particular lot is abutted by a bank to the north. Of course, it's part of the West Side Plaza complex that surrounds it on 3 sides, Northwest Boulevard to the west. Plaza is a large shopping center, approximately 250,000 square feet, owned by the same owners as this property. The Demoulas family entities own really the entire block. Stores within the West Side Plaza are Market Basket, Marshall's, Home Goods, other retailers, including the New Hampshire liquor store. The site contains a 1-story building that measures about 9,000 square feet, has 28 parking spaces to it, and it shares access and gains access through the shared driveway with West Side Plaza. Reciprocal easements for parking access. Utilities exist with this lot as well as the other lots surrounding. Proposed here is a 1-story, 3,456 square foot building addition on the south side of the building. And the addition will be part of a renovation that converts the former Pier 1 Imports building, which you may be familiar with, to a New Hampshire liquor store. The liquor store will be moving from inline adjacent to Market Basket, a standalone facility. The addition is needed to support the warehousing for this user. Minor site improvements include a new loading dock area, improved paved parking. There'll be 30 spaces for the facility. New lighting and landscaping, new architectural elements to the building. We have elevations. Linda, if you're so kind to flip to those, I'll just quickly. Yep, that's the addition in a little bit larger scale. You can see we're basically maintaining the drive aisles, parking. We're just doing new surface, new striping, new concrete walkways. There is a loading dock where currently there is none for the Pier 1 site. It's a minimal one. And then I think the next one, Linda, is the architectural. Yep. So you can see there's a new peak element going in at the corner, a new architectural feature there. And then down at the bottom in the back bump out, you can see that loading dock. But color scheme, the main body of the building is going to stay the same, but new corner entry, new roof will be associated. with the application. Two waivers, Mr. Chairman. First, 279 EE, surveying all the abutting properties. There's also a waiver for minimum parking. Per code, 41 spaces required. We have 30 spaces. But as I mentioned, the reciprocal easements with the abutting properties, there's over 1,000 parking spaces. So parking should not and will not be an issue. We believe the site plan complies with your standards. The conditions of approval, Mr. Husband's comments, Mr. Mendola's comments, I found to be fair and acceptable to our client. And so I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about this application.
Any questions by the board for this applicant? Mr. Meehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious on the proposed building addition. I'm not sure which page, I can't seem to find that. Page 1 of 11. There's a pavement saw cut, vertical granite curb, and then a reconstructing the raised.
Yep, yeah, that's you have a good eye. So, as I mentioned, Pier 1 had no real loading. They would load with panel box trucks. They didn't have semis come in. But the liquor store will have semis. They come in during off hours in the early morning. And what they'll do is they'll come in the main exit, the main drive to West Side Plaza. But because of the tightness of this specific lot towards the home goods store, as an example, they are plenty wide drive aisles there. And as they're moving around to be able to back into the loading dock, we noticed that those two islands needed to be softened.
Yep.
So to make a WB turning movement, they will come in, they will head in, they will back into that slot, and then they're able to leave. So that's the reason why. And again, under same,
Yep.
It seemed to make good sense.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions by the board? Mr. Hudson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it's a question, I just have some concern with the proposed crosswalk at the location. It's a busy driveway entrance. I suppose that's probably why it's proposed. And I do question that it may provide a false sense of security. But it is on private property, so I'm not going to micromanage that design element. They do have, I believe, 7 crosswalks on the abutting parcels, so I leave it to their judgment, but I do, if this were a public street, I would probably not like a crossing.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments for the applicant? Nope, doesn't sound like any. I don't believe there's anybody here in the audience. Just check Zoom one more time. Nothing, nobody?
Staff.
Just, anybody have any, so there's nobody to have any public comments, so I'll, unless the board has any other questions of the applicant, I will go ahead and close the hearing. All good? Okay. I'll go ahead and close the hearing and go into the meeting. Seems pretty straightforward. Seems like a good use of the building and good to get these vacant ones up and running again, particularly in that location. Seems like a pretty standard for a lot of the New Hampshire liquor stores around the area. They all seem to do pretty well. So that's good. So I don't have any questions or comments. The sidewalk comment, I guess that's up to the applicant because it is private property, so, and they've heard what you said. So
Yeah, I would
they
just,
can decide one way or another on their end.
Should they decide to remove it, and
Yeah.
I assume that could be handled administratively, and I would
Yeah.
support. I'm fine with that also.
Okay.
It's really up to them.
Yep. Any other comments by the board? All right, anybody want to make a motion? Mr. Meehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve new business A22-0107 site plan amendment.
Okay, so was there any stipulations? I think there was a bunch, yeah. Yep, okay.
Finding that it does meet the requirements outlined in Section 190-146E with 10 stipulations. Stipulation 1, request for a waiver of Section 190-279EE is granted, finding that the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit of the intent of the regulation. Number 2, granted, finding the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Number 3 will read dated 6/15/2022.
Yep, correct.
And 4 through 10 as written.
Okay, so we have that motion to approve with the 10 stipulations as stated by Mr. Meehan. Do we have a second for it? Second by Mr. Ball. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion passes. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
I'll leave you with this. My definition of growing old is, back in the day, after planning board, when I was done, I'd hit every bar I could. Now I'm wondering if Hayward's, that's my definition of growing old.
There you go.
Have a good evening.
You too. All right, next up, we just have a review of a tentative agenda. Has anybody had a chance to look at that? Or, I don't know, do we have one in the packet?
If we did, Mr. Chair, I did not get it.
Okay.
We do not have one, all right.
So we're all
Well,
set
sweet.
there?
All right.
Okay. All right, and then discussion items, just 23rd,
23rd, be here 5:30.
5:30 here. There's, for those who can make it, obviously. We have a site visit to the applicant project that was proposing the asphalt plant over off Temple. So the intent of that visit would be meet here 5:30, get there right away. I think for the purpose of the applicant and the board, you know, I was generally trying to keep the agenda to about a 30-minute visit at each location. And I guess we'll be coming back here.
We'll go to the Temple Street and
Yeah.
they're having a band pick us up.
Yeah, and then we'll be coming back here, so. So if you could just, I don't know if everybody's responded to you, or who's coming and who's not. Do that. Do we have like a quorum? Have we set the five? Okay, so there's enough, so it will be an official meeting, if you will. Do we need to like have someone take a note? You'll do that? Okay, so she'll take care of that. And that's it. That's the only, anybody else have any other discussion items? Or? Okay. If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Adjourned by Mr. Meehan. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. That motion passes. We're adjourned 9:32.